We can start, ma'am.
Yes. Yes. Good evening, all of you. So, hello everyone. I am Chandravadana. Happy to invite you on behalf of Guru Talks IIT Madras Alumni Association. Thanks to the Alumni Association of IIT Madras for inviting me for this opportunity to host today's session on fat of polymers in marine environment. So today's talk, I hope
Ma'am, you are muted actually.
so. 1 minute.
Oh, we can hear you, ma'am. You can speak.
Today's talk, I hope, accidentally fallen as a tribute to the environmental activist, Mr. Sundarlal Bahuguna, the founder of Chipko movement, on his death yesterday. So it is my privilege to introduce Professor Mukesh Doble, even though he is familiar to the Guru Talks. Professor Mukesh is the founding director of two startups, Thivanam Additives and Nutrosets Private Limited, the bio incubators. Yes.
Can you mute your YouTube?
I have muted, sir. I muted. Is it echoing? No. But I have muted. Is it okay, sir? Professor Mukesh is the founding director of two startups, Thivanam Additives and Nutrasets Private Limited, Bio Incubator IIT Madras Research Park, and Professor Emeritus of Department of Biotechnology, IIT Madras. He has rich industrial experience of 25 years in Imperial Chemical Industries, General Electric Technology Center, and KCP Limited, along with 17 years of academic experience in Biotechnology Department of IIT Madras. His areas of interest are biomaterials, drug design, bioreactors, and bioprocesses. He holds BTech and MTech from Chemical Engineering Department of IIT Madras and PhD from University of Aston, Birmingham, UK. He also has postdoctoral experience from University of Cambridge, UK and Texas A&M University, USA. SAR has authored around 300 technical papers, 10 books, and 15 patents, out of which 2 of them filed in USA and UK. He is a fellow of Royal Society of Chemistry, London, recipient of Herdila Award for Excellence in Basic Research from Indian Institute of Chemical Engineers, and he is also the recipient of the DOE Professor M.M. Sharma Distinguished Visiting Professorship in Chemical Engineering at Institute of Chemical Technology, and also the recipient of the 5th National Award for Technology Innovation in the field of petrochemicals and downstream plastic processing industry, Government of India for the innovation Automicrobial Food Wrap. He is one among the world's top 2% scientists as per Stanford University, USA 2020 listing. He is a member of American Indian Institute of Chemical Engineers. With this, now I invite Professor Mukesh to take over. Thank you, sir.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the kind words, Dr. Chandravadana. And let me thank the Alumni Association for giving me an opportunity to talk to you. I'm going to talk about the interaction of polymers in marine environment. There are two important issues that polymers and marine does. One, of course, we all know the pollution caused by the plastics. You must have heard about microplastics and so on. But the second point, maybe you might not have heard about, that's the problems faced by the shipping industry. When polymers are immersed in ocean, bacteria attached to it, that's called biofilm. This is followed by biofouling. That means bigger organisms get attached organisms like shells and polychaetes and so on, actually, which causes a very serious problem in the shipping industry. And I'm going to talk about that also. So two different problems when polymers come in contact in marine over a long period of time. And we have worked on both of this. So let me spend some time on both these topics with you. Okay, I hope you can see this. So before I start, I have to acknowledge many scientists and professors and large number of research scholars who are involved, because the type of work which we have done involves a lot of field studies. So I have to thank. Without their support, nothing could have been done. One is Dr. Venkatesan from NIOT, Dr. Venugopal from BARC, Dr. Murthy from IG CAR, and Professor Ravi Kumar from Metallurgy Department, IITM, and of course many research scholars, and of course financial support from Naval Research Board, New Delhi, BRNS, Mumbai, and so on. Whatever I am going to talk about is all covered in the publication, the book, which we published a few years back, which is called Polymers in Marine Environment. If you look at plastics, life without plastics and polymers is completely impossible for us to think of. Practically everywhere you will see plastics, polymers, everywhere. Engineering applications, household applications, day-to-day applications, and so on. And these polymers, of course, create a lot of problem, environmental problem. Okay, and not only that, they end up in ocean. 80% of plastic debris in ocean is because of runoff from rivers or from beaches. Okay, so 80%, that's a big number. So whatever we do in the inland goes and ends up there. So that's one of the big problem, leading to plastic pollution, floating plastic debris, microplastics, which are very small sized plastics, which keep floating and they never disappear. And the sea turtles, sea animals think it's food and they consume and get choked. So that's a big problem caused by these waste plastics. Marine industry also uses a lot of polymers. Where do they use? They use it in their ships, boats, ocean-going vessels. As you can see, silicone rubber, polyester, syntactic foam, polypropylene, polytetrafluoroethylene, polycarbonate, polymethyl methacrylate, polyvinyl chloride. So all these plastics, all these polymers are used by marine for underwater cables, for buoys, ropes, anti-fouling coatings, viewing ports, pipelines. So practically a large number of polymers are used by this marine industry. And they face a different problem, which is the biofouling of these plastics or polymers. Biofouling means bacterial attachment and larger organisms in the sea, like I said, polychaetes or barnacles or shells or bryozoans, they all get attached, and thereby fouling the boats, the ships. They cause a lot of damage. They cause a lot of loss, financial loss, because the ships start going slowly. So they have a different type of problem because of the biofouling of these polymers which are immersed in ocean, actually. So what happens? We have the marine environment, we have the polymer surface which is in contact with seawater. So there is a biofilm that's formed. And of course, we also have the heat and the ultraviolet rays from the sun. That leads to biofouling of these materials. So it can lead to biodegradation of the material, that's the polymer, or even biodeterioration. So what's the difference between these? Biodeterioration can be because of ocean currents, because of the wind, high winds. The material, the polymers, break it into smaller parts. So that's not degradation of the polymer, but it becomes smaller and smaller. That's called biodeterioration. Biodeterioration leads to microplastics, plastics which are lesser than 5 centimeter. They are called microplastics, very small material. Okay, so they keep floating, going round and round in the ocean currents. So they cause a lot of problem also. So the biodeterioration causes a lot of problem. Biodegradation is a very slow process because many of these polymers don't degrade so easily. It takes several decades for it to even lose small weight loss actually. Okay, so the biodegradation, if it goes very slow, there is accumulation in the sea as debris and microplastics. This is an environmental problem. Okay, and the biofouling, there's a lot of loss to shipping industry because biofouled material, biofouled ship surfaces affects the material, affects the integrity of the ship, reduces the speed of the ship, so leading to extra usage of fuels and a lot of loss to the shipping industry. So shipping industry does not want their polymers to get biofouled by bacteria and larger organism, whereas we as an environmentalist I think that the polymers that end up in marine should degrade, not deteriorate and completely disappear, thereby overcoming the environmental problem. So these two is what I'm going to talk about in the next half an hour or more. Fate of polymers. So you can see there are a lot of pictures you might have seen in internet over a period of time. So polymers I used everyday used polymers, plastic bottles, a large number of polymers actually. Polymers, they degrade very slowly. Small sized plastics are consumed by sea going animals, birds, thinking it's food, which and then leading to their death also actually. We look at the degradation of common material, plastic bags, about 10 to 20 years. Netting, generally nylon is used as a netting material that takes almost 40 years. Foamed plastic boy, like a polyurethane that takes 80 years. Plastic bottles, look at this, that takes, especially when you use plastic bottles for soft drinks, please remember this, it takes almost 450 years for it to degrade. Aluminum drink can, monofilament fishing line, glass bottles. So you see these numbers are too long, too large for us to even comprehend. So most of these plastics which end up in marine remain as an environmental issue, environmental problem for the flora, fauna that's habiting the marine. There are a lot of pictures. Like I said, you will see when you go to various websites. There is something called ghost fishing, where the sea turtles, for example, or sea lions, for example, they get caught in these plastic debris, either plastic debris floating or plastic nets, which are sinking right at the bottom. They get caught, and that's called ghost fishing. Okay, so the marine debris cause direct impact on these animals. Okay, lot of pictures of these which are affecting the flora and fauna as well, and also it's affecting the islands. We do not realize that, but small islands end up getting a lot of polymer debris washed ashore and get accumulated. Okay, affecting their livelihood, actually, coastal economy, especially if there are fishermen who have to use the marine for fishing. They are really affected because of these marine debris, actually. Rivers, like I said, almost 80% of these plastics that's found in marine or because of the rivers runoff, as well as because of the coastal or beach waste. So you can see our rivers, quite a lot of polymer debris which are accumulating in our rivers, actually. So some statistics, 140 million tons per year of synthetic polymers are produced. Okay, 50% of polymer waste could be polyolefin. Polyolefin is our polyethylene, low density polyethylene, high density polyethylene, polypropylene, and so on. They are very cheap, ubiquitous. So many single-use products are mostly of this. Of course, polyester is also there. If you look at Western Europe, 7.4% of municipal waste is plastic. You can see many countries, large percentage, millions of tons of plastic is found in their daily waste. Okay. So there is something called gyre. These are slowly moving clockwise spiral currents actually. So there are 5 gyres found in our ocean. Okay, one is called the North Pacific gyre, South Pacific gyre, North Atlantic, South Atlantic, and Indian Ocean. These are 5 different gyres. So in these slowly moving currents, phytoplanktons are found, small animals go around with that, some mammals, fish, they all go around in that. And when some study was done a few years back, they found that a lot of plastic, millions of tons of plastic also float, and they start going around in these 5 currents actually. So it's almost, they call it garbage patch. Okay, so if you look at some of these North Pacific and North Atlantic gyres, they are huge, and millions of tons of plastic keep floating around, going round and round, collecting waste from the shores and carrying it inland, and so on actually. So these are gyres. Each current collects fresh trash from all over the world actually, these 5 gyres. So 90% of all these trash is floating around and going round in circles, or plastics. So every square mile of ocean hosts 46,000 pieces of floating plastic actually. So these gyres, if one does some research in this, you can see how much of these plastic waste that's thrown through the rivers and the beaches end up in these circulating trash. So in some areas, plastic outweighs the amount of plankton by 6:1. So what does that mean? That means the fish do not have enough food for it to survive. The small fish which is growing do not have enough food to survive if they are caught in these gyre or the currents actually. So another problem I said is the microplastics. Okay, plastics which are of very small size. Okay, as you can see here, less than 5 mm. This is microfibers from clothing, micro beads, and plastic pellets. They cause a lot of problem. They are because of breakdown. That means the bio-deterioration of larger plastic products, because as I said, biodegradation is a much slower process. And as I showed you, it takes several decades for it to break down. So mostly large plastic pieces end up as microplastics. Okay, soda bottles, fishing nets, plastic bags, microwave containers, tea bags. So they all end up as microplastic actually. Interestingly, they are not only found in marine, but they are also found in freshwater systems, marshes, streams, ponds, lakes, and rivers. Why? Because there is a feedback when these microplastics are generally produced in the ocean. They seem to be coming back into the freshwater system also, because of animals or birds which ingest or which consume, thinking these are food. And interestingly, these microplastics have been found in the gut of fish, gut of animals as well, which is a bit scary. They are embedded in animal tissues through ingestion or respiration, because these plastics are very small in size actually. Okay, they are mistaken by the fish as food, because even birds look at it and you have a colorful floating particles, and they mistake it as food actually. So then, of course, it's going to end up through the food chain, through the drinking water chain, to the human as well. So not much study so far has been done on to identify the amount of microplastics in human, but some studies have been done on microplastic accumulation in fish, in small animals, in the sea. But at some point of time, it's expected that these microplastics will end up in human gut as well, actually. Okay. Yes, yeah, 2018 study conducted on 8 individuals from Europe and Japan found microplastics in fetus. Okay, this is a bit scary because the same plastics which we throw away in the ocean end up as microplastics because of biodeterioration, maybe consumed or absorbed by the flora and fauna in the marine, end up in the fresh water, maybe ending up as drinking in the drinking water or ending up as food. Okay, so the cycle gets completed and we seem to be ending up consuming these microplastics actually. Like I said, the UN study has found that 80% of world's marine pollution is plastic debris actually. It's based on the land-based sources. That means the rivers as well as the beaches actually. So these numbers look very scary. We are talking in terms of almost lakhs of tons of plastic debris found in the ocean. Plastic debris, plastic pieces, micro and macro plastics actually. Plastics have been found in beaches as well. So I'll just show you a few numbers. Plastic litters in UK beaches. You can see almost 296 pieces of plastic in 100 meter of coast. That's about 300 feet of coastline. North Sea region, almost 196 items. Northern Ireland, 387 items. So what are these? Plastic string pieces, plastic drink bottles, plastic lids, packets of sweets, lolly sticks, and of course, cigarette butts are also found in this litter along the coastline. Look at this, and Dutch coast, 300 pieces per 100 meter of beach. Okay. And 80% of this is plastic. European beaches, Italy, Spain, Turkey, again we see almost 300, 400 pieces of plastic material along 100 meters of the beach coastline. Actually. And these are some photographs from our own Chennai. The coastline, you can see the plastic litter, plastic bags, fishing nets, plastic debris, and so on. And we did, interestingly, some study along the coastline of Chennai and tried to collect plastic debris. What we did was we found out gram of polymer per gram of sediment actually, and at different points along the beaches, various beaches. So we see that we almost see sometimes 3 grams per kg of sediment. Okay. And in some places, of course, it's very low. Mostly beaches which are popular for tourists, the Marina Beach, okay, you find a large number, and of course, again, beaches which are very popular, we find large numbers going up to almost 3 grams of plastics per kg of sediment. Okay, so one day these plastic debris is going to end up in the ocean, getting washed away, and maybe end up as a microplastic and end up in the circulating garbage patch. Actually. Okay, so the heat and the ultraviolet leads to biodegradation of the polymer. Biodeterioration is caused because of the ocean currents and the wind, which breaks the polymer, large polymer particles into smaller particles. Okay, and as I showed you, the degradation rates are very, very small. So it takes a very long time for it to completely get erased. So initially, as the polymer surface comes into contact with seawater, there is something called biofilm formation. That means bacteria gets attached. The bacteria present in the marine, different types of bacteria, they get attached to the surface of the polymer, depending upon the surface property. Surface property could be surface energy, roughness, and so on. Once these microorganisms attach, larger organisms start attaching, which is called biofouling, like shells, okay, like polychaetes, okay, like barnacles. They are much larger organisms. Okay? They attach to these surfaces. So what is this biofilm? Biofilm is population of organisms concentrated on the surface. So if you want material to degrade, we need bacteria to sit on it. So biofilm has to be forming on that actually. So large number of microorganisms attached to that. And as I said, it depends on the polymer properties, how rough it is or how smooth it is, what is the surface energy, what is hydrophilic to hydrophobic balance, and so on actually. Okay, so this is a picture using a confocal microscope of bacterial attachment on the surface of a polymer. The green color indicates live bacteria, the red color indicates dead bacteria. Okay, so we can look at surfaces of polymer and tell how the bacteria is attached, how much of bacteria is live, how much of bacteria is dead actually. So we do this type of experiment using a confocal microscope, as well as using some colored dye, green colored dye and red colored dye. These are again some images, as you can see, bacteria sitting on the polymer, okay, after 12 months. Okay, so there's a lot of bacteria just sitting on it after 12 months. So these bacteria give out certain enzymes which can help in the degradation of the polymer. So what are the various things that can happen? Chemical degradation. That means if there are any chemicals that are present, which then material can degrade. Of course, when you talk about natural system, you are not going to talk about chemical present. So mostly it is going to be biodegradation because of presence of bacteria and other marine organism, or it could be because of physico-chemical degradation, like I said, biodeterioration because of the ocean currents and the wind velocities and so on actually. Okay. Of course, ultraviolet rays that are present in the sun and the heat plays a very important role. So we need that to modify the surface of the polymer, which is floating. We have found that polymers which are settled, that means which are not floating, they go down, nothing happens to them. They remain inside under the water for a very, very long time. So ultraviolet rays, heat are very necessary to modify the surface of the polymer for the organisms to sit on. That's very, very important actually. Okay, so floating material chances of degradation is much higher than material which is sunk to the bottom of the sea, because there is no heat and they are not exposed to UV light. UV light helps to degrade the bonds in the polymer chain and helps for the attachment of the organism and for the degradation. Okay, so degradation means what? It is not breaking of the material, that's called deterioration. Microplastic is not degradation of larger polymer. Microplastic is deterioration of larger polymers because of ocean currents and wind velocities. Okay, degradation means change in chemical structure, change in the surface, weight loss, change in molecular weight, loss of mechanical properties, impairment, transparency, and so on actually. So generally what we do is we monitor the weight loss because that's a very clear indication that a material is disappearing. Okay, not just disappearing from the eyesight, but actually getting consumed. That's the weight loss actually. So what happens? Polymers, we have the bacteria sitting on it. The bacteria affects the polymer chain. So there is something called a deep polymerization taking place. And then oligomers are formed, dimers, monomers are formed. We have aerobic bacteria, we have anaerobic bacteria. The aerobic bacteria will eat away completely and convert them into carbon dioxide and water. Of course, so that's called mineralization. anaerobic bacteria, you form methane, hydrogen sulfide, carbon dioxide. Generally, if polymer is floating in the sea water, we are not going to have anaerobic. As the name implies, anaerobic means absence of air. Aerobic means presence of air. So obviously, floating debris, there are no anaerobic bacteria sitting on it. Only aerobic bacteria, because we have air, we have heat, we have sunlight, we have oxygen. So aerobic bacteria will be sitting, and they will sit on the polymer, and they will affect the polymer surface and slowly convert into monomers, and then finally the mineralization taking place. Of course, I'm showing this picture, but it's not going to happen in days or weeks or months. It's going to happen in 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, 100 years, like that. So it's a slow process. So there are enzymes which are produced by the microorganism. Enzymes which the bacteria gives out. So it's called extracellular enzymes. So these extracellular enzymes produced will affect the polymer. Polymer gets depolymerized. So can lead into monomers, carbon dioxide, because bacteria uses these monomers as food. Okay, bacteria sits on it and uses, and finally the material can slowly disappear over a period of time actually. So the bacteria has to sit, form a biofilm, and release proteins, enzymes extracellularly. That means it should liberate outside so that it can start eating the polymers, which is a very slow process, number one. Number two is the polymer has to be conducive for the bacteria to sit on it, and over a period of time it can slowly release the enzyme and so on. So that's why it takes several years for polymers to degrade easily. So many steps are there. Bacteria sits on it. It's called a conditioning film, and then it colonizes the surface, and then there is a mature biofilm formed, and so on actually. So as you can see here, bacteria sits on it. It's fouling, then leaching of material, degradation of the material. Material may lose color. Material will have pitting happening. Material will deteriorate. So many things can happen. This is a very, I'm not drawing the time scale here. We are talking in terms of several decades actually. Okay, so as this happens, polymers can slowly degrade. So we have many tools to determine how the degradation is happening, what's the extent of degradation, and so on. So we have done a lot of study in the lab. We have done a lot of study in the ocean, live studies as well, as we call it, field studies as well. Okay. So we talked about the biodegradation, biodeterioration. Now I said there is another problem faced by shipping industries. When the polymer is immersed in the ocean, there is a biofouling that's formed on the surface of the polymer, which is a big problem for shipping industry, because you see a lot of polymers are used in ships and ocean going vessels, as I showed you in the beginning. So if the material gets fouled, okay, as you can see here, the material gets fouled, it's affecting the integrity of the material, it's affecting the speed of the ship. So a lot of loss, financial loss to the shipping industry. They are talking in terms of billions of dollars. So they don't want material to get fouled. They don't want their polymers immersed in ocean to get fouled. You can see this picture. This is a beautiful clear polymer, polycarbonate. After 6 months, so much of fouling has happened. Bacteria sitting on it, different types of large fouling animals have sat on it. It's very difficult to remove them. As you can see in this picture, they use very strong ways of removing this fouling. Okay, so marine industry uses a lot of money. So they don't want the polymer to get biofouled. Polymers used in marine industry. Those are all mostly engineering type of polymers. Okay, as you can see here, lot of this is a polycarbonate surface, and you can see a lot of biofouling barnacles, and it's impossible to remove these barnacles. They are completely fused on the surface you may have to use acid practically, or the material will get broken. So what happens here in biofouling? Material is there, bacteria sit on it, they form a biofilm, and slowly larger animals start coming, polychaetes, bryozoans, and after some time barnacles, shells start sitting. Then after that, it's impossible to remove them actually. So we are talking in terms of months. Over a period of about 2 to 3 months, you have very large fouling that has happened on the surface. Such a clear and surface over a period of time has completely been fouled actually. So a lot of factors affect biofilm related to the type of environment, pH condition, the dissolved oxygen conditions, okay, how much bacteria is present in the ocean. And then of course, surface properties of the material. Is the surface rough? Is the surface smooth? Is the surface hydrophilic or hydrophobic? What's the surface energy? Type of organism, what type of organisms sit on it. So many factors affect biofilm. Okay, so all these factors can help in the degradation actually. So type of polymers used, type of organisms, then the environmental factors, all these determine the biodegradation of polymers actually. Okay, so different ways to enhance biodegradation also is possible. So now a lot of studies are being looked at to see blends. That means combining natural polymers with the synthetic polymers. Okay, to improve the biodegradation. And can I combine polymers? One which degrades, one doesn't degrade. So can we combine? And so different types of approaches. Can we modify this surface by pre-treatment, UV treatment, heat treatment, irradiation, biosurfactants? So different approaches are being looked at for performing biodegradation of the material. Okay? So different approach. So let me briefly talk about some of the studies we have done in lab, in the field, and so on actually. So, so as you can see, polymers, when we heat the polymer and then try to degrade, it degrades faster over a period of time. In 12 months, we see good weight loss, almost 10% weight loss in polymer weight loss when compared to untreated polymer, where the weight loss is very, very small. So heat treatment helps in the degradation of the material. So we monitor the degradation using large number of tools. One tool is called the Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy. And of course, we use other tools like gel permeation chromatography, okay, thermogravimetry analysis, differential scanning calorimetry. So a large number of tools are used to see how the polymer chemical factors are affected because in the presence of bacteria and what are the various functional groups are formed. So I will not go too much into that area, but the Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy is a very important tool which tells you whether the polymer is getting oxidized. Oxygen from the air, the UV light from the sun together help in oxidizing the surface of the polymer. That we can monitor using the tool called Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy. Okay, that is suppose as we can see as a function of time, different time months, we can see how these things happen. Okay. We look at the changes in the CH3 groups. CH3 groups is nothing but methyl group. We look at changes in the groups like oxygenated groups because oxidation of the material is taking place from the oxygen present in the air. So we try to monitor the changes, chemical changes happening to the material, which can help us to find out the mechanism of the reaction that's taking place between the air, the UV light, and the polymer. And then comes the bacteria, which gives out enzymes which are involved in the degradation of the polymer. Okay, so large number of studies one needs to do to understand. This gives you some changes in the tensile properties as well as you can see here. Tensile strength keeps going down as a function of time. Okay, over a period of 12 months actually. Okay, this picture shows you how bacterial attachment on the surface of the different types of polymer, low density polyethylene, high density polyethylene. And as I mentioned before, green color indicates live bacteria, red color indicates dead bacteria. Okay. A treatment of 1 year of various polymers with various organisms, marine organisms. These are called Bacillus sphericus, Bacillus cereus. Thermally pre-treated, not treated, how the bacteria gets attached. We can see large number of green showing that live bacteria is sitting. And this one you can see a lot of red as well, showing that there are a lot of dead bacteria. That means that these surfaces do not help in the bacterial proliferation. And that's a very important precondition before we achieve degradation, because bacteria has to proliferate, and give out enzymes which can help in the degradation of the material. So a low density polyethylene can degrade better over a period of time and compared to high density polyethylene, because as you can see, the bacteria is able to sit nicely and proliferate over a period of, this is about 1 year study actually. Again, more number of organisms found in the marine like Pseudomonas, Bacillus, all over a period of 1 year after they are treated, thermally treated. Okay. This study was done to see how thermal treating of these polymers help in the degradation of the material actually. And due to that, there is a weight loss, as you can see. Almost 20% of the polymer has lost its weight, low density polyethylene in 1 year, whereas high density polyethylene, we see only 4% or much less when compared to the low density polyethylene. So the polymer properties play a very important role in the degradation in the marine environment in the presence of marine bacteria. These are some atomic force microscope pictures which tells you how the surface of the polymer changes because of the degradation and deterioration. Okay. The bacteria also produces something called biosurfactants, because bacteria and the polymer, which is very hydrophobic, they have to attach very well. So they produce something called a biosurfactant. As you know, surfactant helps in bringing a good interaction in the interface, especially in air-water interface. And many bacteria produces these biosurfactant, which helps the organisms to sit nicely on the surface of the polymer. And this is a very interesting study which we have done. Different polymers, low density polyethylene, high density polyethylene, polypropylene. This is without any polymer. We grow the bacteria over a period of time and see how much of biosurfactant is produced. As you can see, polypropylene produces a lot of biosurfactant because polypropylene is very hydrophobic. So if the bacteria has to sit on it, it has to produce large amount of surfactant so that it can sit. Whereas these polymers are more hydrophilic, so the bacteria can sit nicely. Whereas on polypropylene, it needs more biosurfactant so that it can sit nicely. So bacteria produces something called the biosurfactant, and this study tells you more hydrophobic the surface is, bacteria produces more amount of biosurfactant actually. Okay, so very interesting in vitro, that means lab studies. So what we did later on is we put large amount of various polymer plates in the marine ocean in two different places in Bay of Bengal. Okay, two different places, as you can see in the map, near Ennur port and near the sea, Chennai coastal region. And over a period of 1 year, 18 months, we studied how these material, is there any degradation of this material? Is there any fouling of this material? And all these were studied. Okay, okay, you can see these are some field planning where we had to use divers to place all these material in the ocean. And as you can see, we take out samples of polymers, and a lot of biofouling has taken place of our polymer samples over a period of time. Okay. And then we find out whether the material has lost weight, how much of biofouling on each of these material has taken place. Different type of materials we studied which are used in the marine industry. Okay, as you can see, low density polyethylene. In 1 month, you can see the amount of biofouling, high density polyethylene, polypropylene. Look at the bacterial, look at the large biofouling that has taken place of these materials. Look at the scanning electron picture. The surface of this polymer has really deteriorated after 6 months. Okay, so it's not only biodegradation but also biodeterioration because of the ocean currents as well. Actually, because when you place polymers, as you can see in the sea, there is a lot of ocean currents which can lead to biodeterioration of the material, and you can see barnacles present on the polymer. Okay, large number of barnacles. Okay, and this is the biofouled material polymer, and this is after removing all the soft material. We can see barnacles really attached. It's practically impossible for us to remove these barnacles unless we give an acid treatment of the surface actually. Okay, so different types of biofouling. Okay, as you can see, bryosomes, polychaetes, different on different types of polymers when they are placed immersed in the marine actually. So the biofilm that's formed varies in the type of polymer. Okay, as you can see, is depending upon the type of polymer. Okay, hydrophobic surfaces we find more biofilm and biofouling when compared to hydrophilic surfaces. Actually, weight loss, hydrophilic we find more weight loss when compared to hydrophobic, and weight loss also depends upon the type of place because the amount of oxygen, dissolved oxygen in each of these places are very different. So as I initially said, oxygen plays a very important role in the oxidation of the polymer. So depending upon the dissolved oxygen, you can see here dissolved oxygen, the weight loss is also directly proportional to the dissolved oxygen. So oxidation of the material is a very important factor before you start having the biodegradation in the presence of the organism. Okay. One important study which was done, and is called a base curve, the surface energy versus the amount of biofouling. So the surface energy is given like this. So there is an optimum surface energy where the fouling is very, very low. So design of materials for the shipping industry is generally based on this particular graph. So materials which are used in shipping industry should have this surface energy so that the amount of biofouling is the lowest. Actually. Okay, because if you have higher surface energy, you are going to have high CFU. If you have very, very low surface energy, again, you are going to have high biofouling. This is called the Bayes curve. And this is what we have seen in our study also. We have used a large number of polymeric material, okay, like PDMS, silicone rubber, polyester, foam, polypropylene, polytetrafluoroethylene, polycarbonate, polymethyl methacrylate, polyvinyl chloride, high density, glass, fiber reinforced, polyurethane. All these are used in shipping industry in various parts of the ships, ocean going vessels and boats and underwater buoys and your submarines. Okay, the surface energy, a beautiful graph you can see as the surface energy increases, the biofouling is high. As the surface energy is very, very low, also the biofouling is low. So there is an optimum number. Okay, and if you can work with the materials which have this surface energy, we can really achieve a very good low biofouled material, which is very accepted by the shipping industry. Okay, these are some scanning electron pictures of various types of polymers. Okay, 6 months after deployment in ocean, how the surfaces get changed. And as you can see, these are different types of polymeric material, the biodeterioration and biodegradation, high density polyethylene, polypropylene with star, high density polyethylene. When they are buried in soil, when they are in the marine, immersed in ocean, when they are under UV light. So how these materials get affected in various environments. That's what we are trying to study in this particular picture, as you can see. Actually. So this shows you the scanning electron micrographs of this. Okay. Okay, so how do we reduce the biofilm formation for shipping industry? So one is to use material which has the optimum surface energy, almost 25 as the number, as I showed you here. Yeah, meganewton, millinewton per meter. Or can we have surfaces which can prevent biofilm formation? Can we design surfaces? Can we have some material impregnated which will not permit bacteria to settle down on that, which will kill the bacteria? So that's what we call it the strategies. And we tried some strategies to reduce biofilm formation. I'll just briefly touch upon it actually. I don't want to go too much into it. Okay. I don't want to go too much into it actually. So there are anti-fouling paints. The shipping industry uses a lot of anti-fouling paint, surface renewal paints. That's a totally a different area to work on, to study on. So I will not go into that actually. But as a research, one could think about coating the surface with proteins, even coating, designing of smart materials using biocide releasing paints, using enzymes, nanomaterials, nanotopography. I'll show you some study on this nanotopography. This is called a biomimetic surface. Okay, so different types of surface coatings, surface modifications can be used to achieve the low biofilm or biofouled surfaces actually. Okay, so when we do nanostructuring, the biofouling keeps going down. So we can have different types of nanostructure with different dimensions. So we can prevent the microorganisms settling on it actually. So barnacle attachment is reduced to a large extent by this approach. Nanocomposites. So we have used composites like copper oxide. As you know, copper is a good antibacterial material. Zinc is another antibacterial material. So we have prepared nanocomposites of polymethyl methacrylate and tried to see how the bacterial attachment is. As you can see, different types of organisms, Staphylococcus, E. coli, fluorescent. So, okay, you can see different types of modified polymethyl methacrylate surfaces, and you can see different amounts of attachment of organism on the surfaces. Okay, these are again fluorescence microscope. The green color shows you the live bacteria. The red color shows you the dead bacteria. And of course, these are scanning electron pictures. Okay, both are different in nature actually. Okay, again, these are another type of polymer, PVDF. With copper oxide, with zinc oxide impregnated PVDF. And we can see how these microorganisms are prevented from getting attached on the surfaces actually. Okay, and this tells you how the colony, that means how much of the biofouling that has happened on various surfaces. Hydrophobicity is another approach. That means surface wettability. If the material is hydrophobic, that means it prevents water. If it is hydrophilic, that means it's more of a water loving. So can I create hydrophobic surfaces and see how these hydrophobic surfaces have an impact on the bacterial attachment? So we used silane. As you know, silane, different types of silane. This is polymethyl methacrylate and silane. So we can modify this and produce different types of silanes which will have different hydrophobic nature and coat it on polymethyl methacrylate surface and see the bacterial attachment. Okay, so different silanes have different hydrophobic hydrophilic balance. Okay, that's called the contact angle. Contact angle gives you an idea about the hydrophobic hydrophilic nature. If the contact angle is very low, that means the surface is more hydrophilic. If the contact angle is very high, that means the surface is more hydrophobic. Okay, so we are looking at different silanes, how they prevent or enhance bacterial attachment, as you can see from these pictures actually. Okay, this is the polymethyl methacrylate. This is the glass slides and different silane coating on the surface, and we see different extent of attachment of the bacteria. So attachment again numerically, we see that there is big difference in the colony forming units of the bacteria on the silanes. So we find that UV exposure speeds up deterioration. Okay, unless they are exposed to UV and heat, the polymers don't deteriorate so easily. If they are buried in the ocean or in the sand, then they are not going to get deteriorated much faster. Okay, so I talked quite a lot about polymers interacting with the ocean. Two different issues. One is 80% of marine debris from land and rivers end up in the ocean. And mostly they are everyday use plastics like polyethylenes and polypropylenes and polyesters. So they end up as floating debris. They also become microplastics because they do not degrade faster, but they deteriorate faster because of the pressures of ocean currents, heat, and UV. Shipping industries use a lot of polymers, which are more of engineering plastics by nature, engineering polymers by nature. They don't want biofouling happening to their material because biofouled material leads to the loss of integrity of those material, as well as leads to increase in their fuel cost. So they do not want fouling and degradation. So we have two different problems being looked at actually. If you want to prevent accumulation in seas, we want material to degrade. And as I showed, 80% of marine debris is from land. That and predominantly, as it is well known, that the plastic waste that's ending up in the rivers are mostly single-use plastics. So single-use plastic, one has to think about recycle, reuse, recover, and replace. And if you want to achieve degradation, we have to think about new pre-treatment strategies. I showed you about blending of polymers. I showed you about heat treatment, and then I also showed you about hydrophilic hydrophobic balance, coating the surfaces with the silanes and so on actually. And of course, we need to think about genetically modifying organisms which can help in the degradation. Of course, biodegradable polymers is being looked at quite a lot, but then they are still expensive. Their properties do not match with the industrial polymers. For example, industrial polymers which are used in shipping industries have to be sturdy, has to be strong, has to maintain their material integrity, and has to be remain intact during its use. Okay, so biodegradable polymers or natural polymers do not satisfy these conditions actually. Okay, so it's a big challenge. One needs to look at the debris coming from the land and rivers, how to prevent that, which can prevent 80% of the waste polymers that is found in the ocean. And polymers which are used in shipping industries, they want sturdy material, but one has to also keep in mind that they are not dumped in the ocean, so that they also end up as debris, which will never degrade because they are very strong and sturdy material actually. So it's a big challenge both for the environmentalists to look at preventing degradation, and for shipping industries for preventing biofouling and biofilm formation. Okay, so let me thank all of you for listening to the talk. Let me thank the Alumni Association also for giving me an opportunity. And of course, as I started in the beginning, let me thank my collaborators and large number of research scholars and project associates. As you can see here, there are some more names maybe I have missed out. who were part of these in vitro studies as well as the ocean studies in the field. Actually. And of course, I thank the SAFE, IIT Madras, and various funding agencies. Thank you very much for the time. If there are any questions, I'll be pleased to answer.
Yes, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yeah.
Sir, so it was a wonderful presentation. It was giving a very good, sir, very good accumulation of the points from all the sorts of almost all the properties to discuss about the biofueling and the different properties like physical properties, the chemical properties, even the angle, and so many ways how the biofuel happens and how the shipping industry is getting affected a lot. And I would like to ask one or two questions, and the viewers also, you can put your questions in the chat box. I hope some questions are coming up. So before that, I would like to put mine. So one of the slide I have seen that the relationship between the hydrophilicity and then the weight loss, the hydrophilicity, hydrophobicity, and weight loss. I expect the increase of hydrophobicity, the weight loss has to be decreased, but I am seeing the opposite. I hope I have seen the opposite trend.
Yeah, because you have this Bayer's curve. There is a minimum and then it goes. So both sides is higher. Okay, so the surface energy plays a very important role in the weight loss. Actually.
So and also one more is the growth of E. coli with respect to the copper oxide and then zinc oxide you have shown, and the different species you have shown, E. coli and different species also. And the E. coli growth on the copper oxide surface with protected with CTAB, it has been more compared to the zinc oxide plate. And how why?
That's a point.
It is very good antibacterial. No? It must. It will not encourage the growth.
Yeah, it's very good. Agreed.
Copper cannot encourage.
Yeah, what happens is, I think when we are making the nanoparticles with the copper oxide, CTAB must have covered the whole thing, and so it's become ineffective. Yes, we also saw that, and we were very surprised because copper oxide is much more antibacterial than zinc actually, because of the covering of the copper oxide. We saw that actually. Yes.
And, some general questions could I put, sir? So we have discussed so far the very big stakeholders as the shipping industry and the marine species also to some extent. So can we may I know who are all the different stakeholders and what are all the different challenges faced by the different stakeholders, the governments, the parliament?
So if you look at marine industry, all the marine industries are affected because of the biofouling. What happens is when there is too much of biofouling happens, the speed of the ship goes down, and they have to consume more fuel. So what they do something is once in 2 years they do something called dry docking. The ship is brought to the dry land, and all this biofouling is removed. So dry docking not only affects because they have to pay for dry docking, they also lose the availability of the ship. So shipping industries lose a lot of money. So biofouling is a very important issue. Many paint industries, shipping paint industries are designing new paints which prevents biofouling. So anti-biofilm coatings, surface renewal coatings. So they come up with a large number of coatings which are being now continuously researched to prevent biofouling and attachment. So the paint industry, shipping paint industry is also involved. They're also part of the stakeholders. Number 3 is too much of dry docking. Imagine a ship from Australia is ending up in India with biofouled material from Australia. We are talking about environmental issues because you may end up having a lot of Australian related bacteria and larger biofouled material. So there is now worry about environmentalists getting worried that there is getting a mix-up of these organisms from different places because of this biofouling, actually. So you see interesting issues coming out because of the biofouling of the ocean-going vessels, and which are traveling from one part of the world to another part of the world, practically carrying bacteria as well as larger animals from one part of the world to another part of the world. So how is it going to affect over a longer period of time? Nobody knows, actually.
So, one more question is, the next one is, I have come to know that IIT Madras has developed one unmanned survey for monitoring the depth of the ocean recently. And can we do such unmanned some survey crafts to monitor the pollution level, the plastic pollution level
Yeah,
in the marine system?
more than unmanned, I think manned studies are being done quite a lot, because it is one is collecting samples is an issue. Second is segregating plastics from non-plastic material. That's much more bigger issue as such, actually. But I think that is where the problem is, how to identify yeah, waste is non-plastic material. So currently that's especially in the microplastics, where I said plastic below 5 millimeter is called microplastic. So can you really segregate microplastic from non-plastic material? So the challenge is more there rather than collecting samples per se alone. But yes, unmanned vessels are being used, not unmanned, manned vessels are being used currently by NIOT, for example. NIO, for example, which is in Goa. NIOT is present in Tamil Nadu, Chennai. So they use manned vessels for collecting plastic waste, debris from ocean.
So, we are also monitoring the air pollution level and all. For example, the nitrogen oxides, we are continuously monitoring through satellites. So like that, so all the countries have been monitored, and I have come to know that about China in 2015 or 14 and all, the levels of nitrogen oxides were too high. So the government has taken a lot of steps to reduce those levels, nitrogen oxides with electrical vehicles and all those things. And right now it is so reduced. Chinese air environment, it is so reduced with those very severe pollutants. So like that, the satellite monitoring of the possibility of these plastic pollutions or microplastics, how far it's
yes, I think satellite monitoring of gyres are being done. As I said, there are 6 gyres, the North Atlantic, South Atlantic, North Pacific, South Pacific. That's being monitored using satellites, and they are looking at polymers floating around in these gyres. Yes, that's being attempted, actually. So one is not only monitoring, second is identifying what they are. So that's also being done, yes. As of now, satellite is being looked at, actually, as a possible, but microplastics pollution as a pollutant has come about only in the past 5 years as such, you know. So that's a bigger issue which has started coming into picture, actually.
So also, ocean is acting as the very big sink for carbon dioxide level.
Yes.
To reduce the carbon dioxide level in the atmosphere, and it is by that process ocean is becoming acidic.
Acidic.
So
yes.
the acidification of ocean is keep increasing by our activities.
Right.
So how is this acidification activity affecting? So how does its impact is increased? No?
As of now, the mechanism of degradation, what we have found is, we initially there is a UV which is affecting the deterioration of the plastic. Basically, it helps in the breaking of the bonds of the plastic. Oxidation goes and forms oxides on the surface of the polymer. Once the oxides are formed, it's easy for the bacteria for settle down. Once the bacterial biofilm is formed, they are able to liberate or give out enzymes which are involved in the polymer degradation. So we have found that UV followed by oxygen present in the atmosphere, oxidation, followed by bacterial attachment, which is followed by enzyme liberation. These are the various steps and that will lead to the degradation of the polymer. We have not seen any pH related, we have not done any pH related study as of now, because pH will affect the bacteria that is present, which may have a different impact. That means if the bacteria dies because of changes in the pH, whether the attachment is going to get affected, we have not done that study at all, actually. But the mechanism is, as I said, UV, which will affect the bonds of the polymer, which leads to oxidation, which leads to bacterial attachment, which leads to enzyme liberation, which leads to degradation. That's the sequence of events which we have studied as such.
One of the concern I was having for a long time, sir, we are using the ballpoint pens, and we are having at the top of the ballpoint the small cap. It is
Yes.
very minute, tiny cap. Earlier days we were not having. Nowadays, so for long years we are having. Is
Yes.
it required? We are throwing it immediately, and the possibility of recovering those tiny pieces in the shops or the
Yes.
recycling by the producers itself.
Yeah. Single
We could not.
use, I think single use plastics, we have to follow these 4 R's: recycle, recover, reuse, replace. So I think it's not needed at all. If something is not needed, if it is fancy, I think we have to single use plastic is the biggest culprit. If we can address, as I mentioned, 80% of the plastic waste in the marine comes from land, which is mostly single use plastic. If we can completely avoid, then I think that will be a great service, not only for pollution in the land, but also pollution in the marine. Yes.
Yes. So that the bigger things, it's okay. The polymer bags or the pen cap itself, pen body itself, those are bigger objects. So we could segregate them. But these tiny
Yes.
caps,
Yes.
it will be ended up with the environment only. So anyhow, it will be reaching the digestion system. It will be ending up the species anyhow.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
So
a lot of
the concern should be more.
flora fauna loss, because they think it's food get consumed, and as I showed, the cycle gets completed. You may end up in drinking water or freshwater ponds also. Yes,
Yes.
that's possible.
Yes, sir. And also all the plastic materials, so whatever it is used in the polymer industry, it seems to be mostly the thermoplastics, I hope. So we are having the very established technical possibility for recycling of the thermoplastics, but still because of its density, low density, or somehow it is ended up in the marine environment. So how come we can use the technology? We can leverage technology to lessen the accumulation of those materials, or its to decrease its effect, environmental
As
impact.
of now, as you can see that degrading plastic is not very economical, because that's why, isn't it? There is no, although it is an environmental issue, but nobody wants to degrade polymers because it's not an economical option. But if one can think about recycling or reuse in some other form, then it becomes an economical option, actually. So one needs to consider from that angle rather than simply degrading the material, because that's not very economical option, actually. Yes. One needs to find different applications for the used
And also
plastics, especially like you said, thermoplastics. Like you said, no, thermoplastics is nothing but polyethylene, milk bags, low density polyethylene, uh, linear low density polyethylene, carry bags, high density polyethylene, polypropylene. All these are thermoplastics. Yes, one can think about reuse these material or recycle this material, and there will be a great advantage as such.
And also, there is a more possibility of the conversion of macroplastics and microplastics into nanoplastics under the severity of the ozone conditions, the exposure to light, UV light, the waves, and all those conditions.
Yes.
So mostly it is converting to nanoplastics nowadays. We
Yes.
are more talking about nanoplastics. So what are the further impacts or consequences of these nanoplastics?
It's very scary, because microplastics themselves end up in flora, fauna, and it's slowly coming back to the freshwater lakes, coming into the food chain. So when it becomes nanoplastic, it becomes more easier to end up in our food chain. I think that's much more dangerous for us to think about, actually. Yes, definitely it's very dangerous.
Sir, yeah, it is the common saying that whatever we are doing is coming back to us.
Yeah.
So,
It
but
is.
we are humans going to be impacted by this, whatever consequences we are doing on the marine system. So, through the food chain, how it's going to affect us. Finally, we are ending up with that
Yeah.
impact
See, what happened
consequences.
was in the 60s,
So, how
70s,
far it is?
in the 60s, 70s,
How,
80s, everybody thought about development. So nobody thought about environment, right? So development. So many things started coming. We never thought about environment. So in the 90s, 2000, the world globally, everybody, the development ratio maybe is much higher. So then we realized that we have really messed up our environment during the 50s, 60s, 70s, right? So now we have realized they are all coming back to us. At that point of time, our goal was development, um, economy. So nobody thought about sustainability. Nobody thought about environmental. So only in the past 20 years, we started thinking about it. So we need to quickly find solutions which will include both development as well as, I think, environment or sustainability. Whereas in the original 30 years, I don't think after the Second World War, we never thought about sustainability or environment, right? We thought only about development. So that's the problem which we are facing now. And as you say, it's coming back to us in the drinking water, in the food chain, in various ways. It's coming back to us.
yes, sir. And now the era is the knowledge era. So we are using the knowledge, the technology, technical knowledge to the core we are using. So we are having all kinds of technical knowledge, the possible policies, and so whatever we need, we have to back the pollution problems, the marine pollution. But still, we are acting as the witness or the evidences. Every day, we are seeing the death of the mass of the marine species. So we are
Yeah.
witnessing all this. So where do we lack? Do we
Okay.
have lacking with the knowledge, or lacking with the technology, or concern, lacking with the concern for the species?
I think
Or
we have the technology, we have the knowledge, we are lacking in the policies, right? Very
policies?
strong policies is what is needed, right? So if you technology and the knowledge is there, but the policies, we have to, everybody has to realize that it's going to be a serious issue for our grandchildren. So we need, I think, very strong policies has to come in. And you must have been seeing in this carbon emission, CO2 emissions, how the various countries are meeting and discussing and debating. So I think the plastic also has to be debated as one of the important topics by all the countries involved, and they have to bring strong policies. So I think we are lacking in the policies, not in the knowledge.
And also in your book, you have written the book on that the same topic. You had mentioned that the international agent, some body needs to be developed to take care of. So from throughout the international, all the countries, some body has to be established. It has to take care of those issues like that. But
Mhm.
really, it is happening, or it is still not.
It's still not happening.
A myth.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is because these bodies are never strong. They give suggestions, they give findings. That's it, right? Implementing is individual countries, how strong the countries are, how strong they feel, how strong the impact is. So it's an individual country which has to address those issues. So the international bodies can give only suggestions, their findings, their knowledge. That's it. Beyond that, it is left to the individual countries to do that.
Thank you, sir. And one question from the audience is how to expedite the degradation of polymers, not only in the marine but other environment
Okay.
also?
I very briefly touched about, can we think about some genetically modified organisms. So there is a lot of scope to do work on it. We have looked at thermal degradation, improved by oxidation of the surface. Using UV, can we enhance the degradation? So we have also looked at gamma rays. So we call it pre-treatment. Before putting it to biodegradation, pre-treatment. But we have never looked at genetically modified strains. So a molecular biologist can think about looking at genetically modified strains. A microbiologist can look at new strains. Can they look at hundreds of strains present in marine, present in ocean, land, and identify new strains which can do the job faster? So a microbiologist can work on it. So different experts can work on different aspects of enhancing. A polymer chemist can think of new polymers which will degrade. It will show very good application, but when I don't want it, it should degrade very fast. So can a polymer chemist or a material scientist can develop such materials? Okay, so for example, I use a polymer like PVC, which is very strong, which will never degrade. Once it's done, can I put some coating on it, which will enhance the degradation? So can somebody think in that line? So there is scope for material scientists to work on. So a strong polymer does its job in the ship. Instead of throwing it out, you coat it with some material, then it starts degrading. So can somebody think in from that angle? So different opportunities are there for different experts to work on it.
Thank you, sir. So there's some thanking for the good presentation, and some awareness has been created in UNSDG. So all these have been mentioned by the audience.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So thank you very much, sir, for this wonderful topic and then the elaborate presentation.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your support, and also Rakesh for helping me to do that. Okay.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.